It began on an unusually quiet Friday evening. I had just come home after a long day at work, anticipating the comforting chaos that usually defined our household. I imagined the familiar sounds of my daughter diligently working on her homework, my wife Karen humming as she prepared dinner, and the house alive with laughter and warmth. But as I stepped inside, I was greeted by an unsettling silence. Something was off, though I couldn't quite place it. As I walked through the house, I found Karen sitting in the living room, her phone pressed tightly to her ear. Her voice was hushed, her tone carrying an odd mix of excitement and secrecy. My instincts whispered that something was wrong, but I chose to dismiss the feeling. After all, we'd been married for 12 years. Despite a few rough patches, I had always believed our relationship was built on trust and love. But over the next few days, that faith began to falter. Karen's behavior shifted in ways that were impossible to ignore. Late-night phone calls, unexplained outings, and a growing emotional distance between us painted a picture I couldn't overlook. Doubts began to take root, feeding on every moment of her evasiveness. I wrestled with the idea of confronting her, torn between fear and the need for the truth. Eventually, my desperation outweighed my hesitation. One evening, driven by a mix of dread and determination, I set up a hidden recorder in our bedroom. It was a decision I hated making, but I couldn't live with the uncertainty any longer. Days later, I retrieved the recorder, my hands trembling as I pressed play. Karen's voice filled the room, every word slicing through me like a blade. She wasn't talking to a friend or family member. She was speaking to Jack, her lover. Her tone was light, almost mocking, as she laid bare her betrayal. "Jack, you won't believe how easy this is," she said, her words dripping with disdain. "My spineless husband does everything. Cooks, cleans, deposits all his earnings into our joint account. He doesn't question a thing. Meanwhile, I've been stashing away my own income in a separate account. If we ever get divorced, he won't see a single dime. He's such a fool." I felt the blood drain from my face. This was the woman I had devoted my life to, the mother of my child, the person I trusted above all else. And she was mocking me, reducing me to nothing more than a tool in her selfish scheme. Fury surged through me as I clenched the recorder in my hand. How long had this been going on? How had I been so blind? As the anger and heartbreak intertwined, a grim resolve began to take shape. I couldn't let her betrayal go unanswered. I wouldn't confront her in a fit of rage. No, I would expose her lies and ensure she faced the full weight of her actions. I started piecing together the fragments of her deception, diving into her phone conversations, messages, and the subtle clues I had missed over the past year. The affair hadn't been a fleeting mistake. It was a calculated betrayal that had unfolded over months. Jack, an old college friend of hers, had reappeared in her life after a chance encounter at a party. What began as innocent reminiscing had spiraled into something far darker. Their relationship had progressed from secretive texts to meetings in hotel rooms during her so-called girls' nights out. They had even used the homes of mutual friends who were complicit in their deceit. Each revelation was a fresh wound. Karen's casual indifference to her betrayal was staggering. "I'm just so tired of his predictable, boring routine," she had confided to Jack in one recording. "With you, I can forget about being a wife and mother and just focus on myself." Jack, for his part, encouraged her disdain, mocking me with the same callousness. "Your husband is clueless," he had laughed. "He's like a golden goose. Keep him around long enough to get what you need, then let him go." The final unforgivable blow came when I discovered Karen had brought Jack into our home. The very place where we had built a life together, where our daughter played and laughed, had been desecrated by their betrayal. It was a violation I couldn't stomach. But through my pain and anger, I found clarity. I didn't just want revenge. I wanted justice. Their arrogance, their selfishness, their complete disregard for the family we had built together, they needed to face the consequences. I resolved to be methodical, to dismantle their lives with the same precision they had used to deceive me. So, I played my part. I remained the doting husband, pretending to be none the wiser. Each morning, Karen would kiss me goodbye, oblivious to the fact that I was working tirelessly behind the scenes to gather every shred of evidence I needed. My pain was a constant companion, but it fueled my determination. I would make sure Karen and Jack regretted every lie, every betrayal. They thought they had won, but they had no idea the storm that was coming. Karen had always handled our finances, and I had trusted her without hesitation, a blind faith I now deeply regretted. When the first seeds of doubt took root, I sought the help of a financial advisor, and together, we uncovered troubling irregularities. Karen had been siphoning small amounts of money from our joint accounts into a private one for months, perhaps even years. It wasn't just an affair she was funding, it was a carefully crafted escape plan, her safety net for the day she decided to leave me. But what she didn't know was that I had started funneling my own earnings into a separate account she couldn't access. I stopped contributing to our joint account, leaving just enough to cover household expenses, ensuring she wouldn't notice the missing funds, not yet. It was a quiet but deliberate move, the first step in my own plan. Determined to uncover the full scope of her betrayal, I decided to escalate my efforts. One evening, while Karen was out running errands, I installed a GPS tracker on her car. If she insisted on sneaking around with Jack, I wanted to know every detail, where they went, how long they stayed, and who else might be complicit in their charade. The tracker paid off almost immediately. Just a few days later, Karen claimed she was meeting a friend for coffee. I smiled, kissed her goodbye, and watched her drive off as though I believed every word. Moments later, I opened the tracker app and saw her heading straight to a secluded motel on the outskirts of town. The following day, I visited the motel myself, not to confront them, but to gather evidence. A generous bribe to one of the staff members gave me access to their reservation records and security footage. The truth was laid bare. Karen and Jack had been frequent guests, booking the same room under fake names. The footage showed them entering the room together, laughing, kissing, and completely unburdened by guilt. It was all there, undeniable proof. At this point, I had a mountain of evidence. Financial records exposing her deception, recordings of her mocking our marriage, GPS logs of her secret rendezvous, and now video footage. But instead of confronting her immediately, I bided my time. I wanted Karen to believe she was still in control, blissfully unaware of the storm gathering over her. Even our daughter, Emma, began to notice Karen's absences and peculiar behavior. One night, she asked me, her voice tinged with innocent confusion, "Dad, why does Mom spend so much time away from home?" My heart shattered as I reassured her, knowing the truth would devastate her. But in time, Emma would play a pivotal role in exposing Karen's betrayal. The final unraveling came on a night that would change everything. Emma had been invited to a sleepover at a friend's house, something Karen had encouraged. Karen mentioned she'd use the evening to catch up on work and, as part of her facade, made my favorite dinner before leaving. I played along, masking my suspicions. However, Emma called me that evening, saying she didn't feel like staying at her friend's house and wanted to come home. I told her to come straight back, but not to mention anything to her mother. I had a feeling that night would bring everything crashing down. Emma returned around 9:30 p.m. as I sat in the living room watching TV. We were chatting when a faint giggle floated down from upstairs. Emma froze, her eyes wide with confusion. "Dad, is someone here?" she whispered. My stomach churned, knowing exactly what was happening. I told her to stay downstairs while I quietly crept upstairs, motioning for her to follow once I ensured it was safe. As we neared the master bedroom, the muffled laughter turned into something far worse. There they were, Karen and Jack, completely oblivious to the world around them. Emma, standing behind me, peeked around the corner just in time to see her mother tangled up with Jack in the most damning act of betrayal. Her gasp cut through the air, loud enough to make them freeze. The room fell into an unbearable silence. Karen's face went pale as she scrambled to cover herself, and Jack looked like he wished the ground would swallow him whole. Karen stuttered, her voice shaking, "Emma, this isn't what it looks like." But it was too late. The damage was done. Emma's eyes filled with tears as she stared at her mother, a mixture of anger and heartbreak etched across her face. "Mom, how could you?" she screamed before turning and bolting down the stairs. Karen turned to me, her panic evident. "I can explain," she pleaded, but I stayed cold and unmoving, my fury barely contained. "Explain what, Karen? That you've been sneaking around with this lowlife for over a year? That you've been hiding money and planning to leave me? Or that you've just traumatized our daughter by letting her witness this filth?" Jack tried to speak, but I cut him off, my voice a dangerous growl. "You have 5 seconds to get out of my house before I call the police for trespassing. Move." He hesitated but quickly grabbed his clothes and bolted out the door. Downstairs, I found Emma curled on the couch, tears streaming down her face. She looked up at me, her voice trembling. "How long has this been going on, Dad? Did you know?" I sat beside her, pulling her into a comforting embrace. I explained that I had discovered everything recently but had wanted to protect her until I had enough proof. She clung to me, her sobs shaking her small frame. "I can't believe she would do this to us," she whispered. Inside, my rage simmered. Karen hadn't just betrayed me, she had destroyed the foundation of our family. And now, Emma had witnessed the fallout firsthand. This was the breaking point. Karen's actions had crossed every imaginable line, and I was done playing nice. That night, as Karen sobbed in the guest room and Emma cried herself to sleep, I stayed awake, my mind racing. This wasn't over. Karen thought she could manipulate me, that I was too spineless to fight back. She was about to find out just how wrong she was. Karen believed she had outsmarted me. She assumed she held all the cards, but she had gravely underestimated my resolve. Over the weeks, I had quietly pieced together every fragment of her betrayal: financial records, secret messages, and recordings of her boasting about her infidelity. By now, I had all the evidence I needed to dismantle her life, one calculated move at a time. The next morning, I acted as though nothing had happened. Karen was visibly uneasy, her guilt hanging in the air. Emma, however, refused to speak to her, the silent tension in the house making every moment unbearable. I pretended to head out for errands, but my destination was far more strategic. I went straight to the bank. Karen's hidden stash of money, which she had secretly funneled into a private account, was her safety net for a future divorce. What she didn't realize was that I had already tracked down the account. Using a recording of her own arrogant confession about hiding money, I filed an immediate claim to freeze it under the grounds of financial fraud and concealment within our marriage. By the end of the day, her account was locked. The realization hit her that evening when her credit card was declined. She said nothing, but her panic was unmistakable. With the financial side handled, I turned to the legal front. I had already consulted one of the top divorce attorneys, sharing every scrap of evidence I had gathered. My lawyer, delighted by the airtight case, immediately filed for divorce on the grounds of infidelity and financial misconduct. But I wasn't finished. I also filed a lawsuit accusing Karen of financial fraud, intent on exposing her deception in the courtroom. The day she was served with the divorce papers was unforgettable. Her reaction was explosive. She stormed into the house, accusing me of being vindictive. I stayed calm, my voice steady. "I'm just doing what you taught me, Karen, looking out for myself. Isn't that what you've been doing all along?" She had no response, only rage and desperation. What followed was the most satisfying phase of my plan. Karen had spent years cultivating an image of being the perfect wife, beloved by her social circle and adored by her family. She thrived on their admiration. I decided to shatter that illusion. I sent copies of her incriminating messages and audio recordings to her parents and closest friends, without commentary, letting her words speak for themselves. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Her parents called me in shock, horrified by their daughter's actions, apologizing profusely. Her friends, once devoted to her, began to distance themselves. Her reputation, so carefully constructed, crumbled like a house of cards. Karen's world was collapsing. Her finances were frozen, her friends and family had turned their backs, and she was now facing a lawsuit. Jack, the man she had risked everything for, ghosted her the moment things spiraled out of control. He disappeared without a word, proving himself to be as spineless as Karen once claimed I was. Emma, too, made her choice. She stayed with me during the divorce proceedings and refused to even look at her mother. One night, as we sat together, she hugged me tightly and said, "Dad, you deserve so much better than her. I'm so sorry you had to go through this." Her words broke and healed me all at once. They reminded me why I had fought so hard to uncover the truth. The day of the court hearing brought Karen's ultimate defeat. The evidence against her was overwhelming. The judge not only granted me full custody of Emma but ruled in my favor for the financial fraud lawsuit. Karen was ordered to pay a significant settlement for the emotional and financial damages she had caused. Her face in that moment, a mixture of disbelief and utter defeat, was something I will never forget. She had gambled everything and lost. Once the dust settled, Emma and I packed our belongings and moved to a new city, leaving behind the painful memories. We started fresh, building a new life together. Karen occasionally tried to contact Emma, but my daughter made it clear she wanted no part of her mother's life. As for Karen, she was left with nothing. No money, no reputation, no family support. The betrayal she had orchestrated so meticulously had cost her everything. And though I felt a sense of justice, my true satisfaction came not from revenge but from the peace Emma and I found in rebuilding our lives. This journey wasn't easy, but it taught me an invaluable lesson. Betrayal does not define you. How you rise from it does. Karen's lies may have momentarily shattered my world, but they also revealed my strength and resilience. They strengthened the bond between Emma and me, proving that trust and loyalty can weather even the fiercest storms. Betrayal, no matter how painful, offers a chance to rediscover your worth. In the end, the best revenge is not destruction. It's reclaiming your life and moving forward with dignity. Karen's downfall was her own doing, and her actions served as a harsh reminder that deceit can destroy not just relationships, but lives. For Emma and me, it was a new beginning, one defined by honesty, love, and the unshakable resilience of those who refused to let betrayal break them.